Hi there. So welcome to Wednesday afternoon. We're going to talk about cognitive theories and philosophical theories. I'm going to talk about them generally, and then I'm going to give you an example of each. There's going to be some activities. Again, you can choose to do them and contribute. You can choose to do them in a group to share and discuss, and then you can contribute them as one, or you could just ignore them and do the readings and just meet for the recap. So that's the objectives for today. We're going to look again at some of the media pieces, and now I think you're getting your bangs. You're able to make more quick decisions as to what's the alignment with theories, with some of the four theories we've seen. We are going to look at an example of philosophical framework, philosophical theory. So this is a categorizations that I've created and to ease you through this landscape. And then examine one example of cognitive theory. So again, that's a categorization that I'm offering you in terms of ease. And then during the recap, we'll talk about your presentation topics. So I think now everything is more or less settled. So here again is my sort of very crude map, but we did the top. We finished with postmodern theory. You've seen the four global theories that you're going to encounter at all times. And then below that, now we're getting to context-specific theories focusing on learning. And there you have the four categories, which I'm so presenting to you as a guide in these vast sort of category that has lots and lots of content. So the first one is philosophical approach. So why do I categorize as such, and what do they have in common? So they are all lenses. You will recognize them because they are more concerned about the way they would like the world to be than the way the world is now. So that's what makes them philosophical in nature. It's really about sort of wishful thinking. They're not offering you a sort of lens to see the world as it is, but they're offering you a lens to see the world as it should be and as they would like it to be. So in that respect, they're sometimes accused of being, I say here, ethereal, overly abstract, too idealist. And we're going to see that a lot of them have been around for a long time. So that adds fuel to the fire because a lot of people say, well, they've been around for so long and they're still not becoming a reality. So that maybe they are just too ethereal, too conceptual to ever be put into use. They tend to be wide and all-encompassing. So it's both ontology and epistemology. Really, it's the world as it is, us, the nature of being, but also the process of knowledge and learning. And most of them have been around for a long time. So you're going to see examples that have been around for a very long time, sometimes even centuries. So that's both a strength and a weakness. A strength because you have lots and lots of authors that are placing themselves within these theories, and they really create a tradition, a school. But on the other hand, it can also be a criticism because people can accuse them of being somewhat disconnected from reality and still after centuries, projecting a world that we would like to see, not the world that is actually there. So I'm going to let you work independently during the afternoon, and I would like you to look at humanistic theory as an example of a philosophical theory. So it's just an example of that whole category, but it's going to be a good example to show you some of the characteristics that a philosophical approach to theory has. So you've got two links there, which are going to be useful. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about these as well. So try and look at humanistic theory generally, and I'm going to talk to you about some of these authors here, which you are going to encounter quite a lot. So Montessori, I don't need to explain, but be careful when we say Montessori. We don't mean the Montessori school. We mean Maria Montessori, who is the original founder of the philosophy. And the philosophy is quite distinct from what has actually become just a business enterprise. But if you go back to Maria Montessori's original texts, that would be considered humanist. So I'll let you explore that if you're interested. But she's definitely, firmly grounded within that movement. Dewey, though John Dewey becomes difficult because he has written volumes and volumes and volumes. He's written on just about everything. He's written thousands and thousands of pages, and sometimes with Dewey, he's touched on everything. So it's very hard to both align him with the specific theory and then also to extract from it because there's just so much information and you don't know where to start. But he is definitely in that current and firmly within the humanist movement. I've said it can be really very old. So really the origins, as far as you can go back, would be Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who's a French philosopher from the 18th century, from the Enlightenment. And Rousseau wrote two very large pieces, but they're novels. They're not actually theoretical manuals. They're novels. He wrote a manual called Les Milles, and the other one's called La Nouvelle Héloïse. So Les Milles is the story of a little boy growing up, and La Nouvelle Héloïse is a little girl, and they are brought up in this sort of utopian world. He was interested in the sort of nature versus culture. So he imagined kids growing up in a world that we would create for the purpose of keeping them good and innocent and filled with the enthusiasm of youth and a curiosity for knowledge. So very, very thick novels that he takes right up to adulthood. But he imagines this little boy growing in sort of a nature context rather than a culture context. And then the same for the little girl called La Nouvelle Héloïse. So really, he's the founder of this humanistic sort of tradition. So you see, it's been around for nearly 3 centuries. It's not something new. And again, sometimes it's criticized for that. So I'll let you use the two sections here. You also have two texts if you have time. It's in the readings. But I'm not assuming that you're going to have that much time today. But if you want to return to this, you have two texts in the reference section as well, in the reading section. I'm also going to ask you, I'm not going to ask you, I'm going to tell you, how does it connect to other wider theoretical paradigm? Where would you situate? That's the kind of exercise you're going to do when you do your presentation, right? Now you have that compass and you have that map. We are going to try and get you to locate your theory, the theory you're talking about with regards to the four that we've looked at. So the connection here is to phenomenology, because it's always focused on free will. You will see that as one of the features. It's always connected to the individual's ability to adopt a worldview that is of their making. So we're back to this subjective reality that is of foremost importance. And especially when you look at also, for example, in nature culture divide, he really goes back to this essential sort of lived experience, right? Which would be essentially good and essentially, sort of curious and all those things. So it's heavily based in phenomenology, the subjectivity of the being, but that subjectivity for the humanist being inherently good and well natured, and that's what they argue. I'm going to ask you about the impact on methodology. Just take a few minutes and think about it, and then we will move on to cognitive theories. So you can stop there, try and put a few words if you're willing to interact in the forum, and then we'll move on to cognitive theories. Okay, cognitive theories, they're put together today just for the convenience of doing two within one session, but they're not connected in any way. So cognitive theories, some general features, they are all focused on the way the brain works, mostly concerned with epistemology, right? How do we learn? How do we create knowledge? Many of these theories are connected and have evolved historically one from the other. So you are going to see some that are aligned, some that are contradicting each other, but they're mostly evolved as a group, evolving from each other. And most of them have emerged from early psychology and are closely connected, therefore, to positivist stance. These early psychology were people sitting in labs, right? So pure scientists, and so all of these theories tend to be very much positivist. They're positivist in stance, positivist in perspective, right? But some have evolved, I'm saying, and have moved away from their origin. So a lot of them have started at positivist theories, but you're seeing them now in 2020 having come a long way, and sometimes having moved out of that alignment, sometimes towards phenomenology, right? Rather than looking at universal big trends and principles and behaviors that can be transferred and validated and observed every time. It's now the concept is sometimes survived, but moved into more of a phenomenological approach, where we argue that that is probably what the subject thinks. That's probably what the subject is using to construct reality, but not being so bothered about the sort of universal principles or this notion of validity or showing that this principle applies to absolutely everyone. So some evolution there. So as an example, I've chosen the theory of mind, which was very, very popular in the 80s. So I'm going to let you work. I shouldn't say group activity, I should say interactive activity, unless you decide to do it as a group. So you've got lots of links. I'm going to double check them tonight to see that they work. Theory of mind is quite exciting, even if you end up rejecting it, but it's quite exciting to watch and it's quite fun to watch. So I think you're gonna enjoy looking at all this. And it's good to know historically that it existed, because you may have to sometimes argue against people on the basis of theory of mind. It's still a very active debate, so We're going to see what you think and see how we can critically assess it. Okay, and at the end there's a fairly long video, but it's probably good to just do all these first and then watch the other one as a recap once you've jotted down your essential elements. And two questions which I'm going to ask you. Three. While you watch the videos, try and find out what the false belief test is. That's going to be essential to your understanding of the theory. So that's just to double check that in the previous slide, you've gone deep enough to realize and be able to explain what the false belief test is. It's at the heart of that theory. And then tell me about the contemporary context within which theory of mind is used in education. There is one specific area, so it's going to be important to tell me about it. And what are some of the criticisms made against theory of mind? And that's going to be important because you will see that it is mostly debunked now. So it has a lot of critiques and not many followers. So we'd like to understand why it's been sort of debunked and sort of dismissed. But it's still theory, still used, so people still write with it. It's interesting. And that happens to a lot of theories, cognitive theories. They don't age well because they are so positivist, so pure science, so made in a lab. They tend to get sort of, someone develops them further and disproves the original beliefs. They'll argue that they are sharpening, their sort of their process, and that therefore they're evolving. And often, it's about the thing that comes after, not the theory that was valid 20 years ago in the labs. It's a very positivist process, right? Saying that because science improves, that latest version is the right one, and ones previously had faults and were not the ones that we should retain. Mythological choices here, I've given you the answer, tend to be quantitative because theory of mind is even influenced by traditional psychology. Therefore, it's a very positivist stance. And there are some studies exploring theory of mind from a phenomenological angle, but it's mostly to refute the theory and show its inability through the light of the lived experience of children with autism, for example. So, you will see some studies that are phenomenological, but then they're not sort of adopting theory of mind. They are showing that adopting theory of mind actually does not work with a phenomenological approach to autism, for example. I have given you, as always, a couple of examples that you can browse the abstracts. And then where does it situate itself on a global landscape? As I've said, not surprising, it's traditional and very aligned with early psychology, so it's going to be very positivist in inclination, and this is why it's being criticized often as being reductionist. Those are the readings that you have, and I've tried to put links to the library, so this one's a huge link there, but you have it in the reading and you can click on them and go straight to them. And you even have a book on humanistic, you have even a book, yes, this one, Doherty, Theory of Mind. So if you're interested, you can actually access the entire book through the library. The first one here, it's not linked because it's downloaded directly. You've got a copy on the Moodle, so you have a PDF. So that's it. Enjoy your afternoon. I'm sorry I always sound a bit tired when I record the afternoon because for me it's evening. I need to get it all ready for you tomorrow. But you're not. You've just had lunch and we've just had a session on inclusion and theory. You're ready to go. So you're going to find this one fun, I think, and it's not too hard to digest because we're going lower down that pyramid. We're going into theories that have less scope, and obviously you're going to find them less difficult to digest because they are more contained. They're not offering you a worldview. Often they're now offering you something much more specific in terms of either epistemology or the classroom or education or child development. So you're going to have more fun and you're going to feel less that it's less daunting than the four big ones that we looked at before. So enjoy, and then we will recap at 4:30 for half an hour and see if there's any issues that arose from those. Obviously, these are just examples, and as you go through, you may classify yours and see whether yours, the one that you're presenting, is it a cognitive theory? Is it a philosophical theory? And then tomorrow we'll look at two more, psychodynamic and psychosocial. Okay, so I wish you a good afternoon, and we'll see you at 4:30.